the Lisbon Addictions Conference. 1,800 people who think about nothing but addiction day and night. Researchers and academics and advocates are here. And they obviously focus on preventing addiction, but also on harm reduction, and drug harm reduction is key. And it turns out that nicotine is a drug, a psychoactive substance. It's not a very strong one, but it is, let's admit, a drug. And so nicotine harm reduction is a thing. We're here from INNCO to get that conversation moving along. There are quite a few sessions here on tobacco harm reduction. We'll be attending those and happy to talk to people there and make contributions. We have a poster here at the Lisbon Conference on harassment of nicotine harm reduction advocates. And it's very important for INNCO to be present at these kind of meetings that are mostly outside of our normal community and our echo chamber, because it's just expanding our network, expanding our connections, building potential partnerships, and really connecting with people who care about human rights and social justice for people who use drugs. Is just incredibly important to us.
Nicotine generally is not part of the conversation. Alcohol has been for, say, the last 5-10 years, but nicotine not, as it just simply hasn't been registering as a psychoactive substance at all. But as of 2019, there is a 31 UN common position on all psychoactives that they actually do fall under the same umbrella, whereby harm reduction is one of the key ways to attack the problem. As basically, if you use drugs, whatever drug that is, you don't lose any of your human rights or rights to social justice, and therefore they should be treated equally. But that's not entirely easy because some of the substances are legal, and while most of the talked about substances here are the illegal substances. But that's a legal definition. And we are ending the war on drugs in most parts of the world. So let's not start one on nicotine.
I think the most important thing in this kind of conference is that you meet people around the world and you change all the things like how you work in your home country, and then we share knowledge and get new ideas from our work in our homeland.
This type of conference, I think it's really important because it's about disseminating new ideas. It's about getting new research to the people who matter in terms of the practitioners, and actually the opportunity to get together and discuss things with other colleagues, which you may not get the chance to do face-to-face in other places.
Up until about 20 years ago, the World Health Organization had a very draconian, strong view, total prohibition of all illicit drugs. And they changed their policy after a number of human rights organizations pointed out to them that countries were executing drug users based on World Health Organization recommendations. And loss of life is kind of a human rights issue, but it also shows that policies can change.
Yes.
When you bring in a human rights lens, when you bring in a social justice lens, as opposed to just thinking about kind of in the narrow confines of the silo of tobacco control.
True. And then again, also you have the notion of health economics, in which if you actually do the math, generally keeping people alive and healthy, no matter how they choose to live their lives, is a much better option than incarceration, execution, all of those things, with all that entails.
I used to work in a community mental health team, and one of the exclusion criteria for people who have substance use problems is if you refer them, if they have a comorbid mental health problem, and if you refer them to a special service to obtain psychological treatment, the thing that comes up immediately is that if they're using substances, they will not be able to participate in all these things in the psychological treatment. That is the bane of the addiction field. That's what I feel. I think it should be more inclusive, and that is a very fundamental issue that we need to be tackling as well. The stigma is still there in terms of how we help people who have addictive problems, and how we approach them, and to increase the level of understanding and awareness that these are people who have actually have a brain disease. They might have used initially for the pleasure or something like that, but down the line it's become a habit, and it's become a disorder of the brain, and we need to help them to recover from whatever addictive problems they have, and the services needs to be very inclusive in trying to help them and not to exclude them.
INNCO is a nonprofit organization that supports the rights of 112 million people around the world who use safer forms of nicotine. We've presented a poster here at the Lisbon Addictions Conference, and this is on harassment of advocates who support nicotine harm reduction. This is in response to a paper that appeared about 2 months ago in the British Medical Journal from researchers funded by Bath UK that interviewed 23 or surveyed 23 tobacco control people around the world. We have surveyed 35 people using exactly the same survey instrument, but just with the positions reversed. And what we've discovered is that people in our community who advocate for safer nicotine are harassed constantly, ejected from meetings. Some have actually received death threats. They're attacked legally, and they're attacked even physically. So we present to here in this poster some of the results of the survey, which actually includes more than 20 different question responses. This is just highlights. So here we have just the preliminary results of something that we would like to publish. And of those who were surveyed, the 35 that we contacted, almost half have experienced some form of intimidation from people on the tobacco control side of the fence. And if you know, the field of tobacco control is now deeply divided between people who support harm reduction and those who oppose it. And 65% believe that people in the whole community have been intimidated in some way, and nearly 80% have experienced some form of discrimination. I myself have been ejected from meetings on the assumption that I work for the tobacco industry, and on we go. But ad hominem attacks, slander is a constant sort of daily experience for people in the nicotine or tobacco harm reduction field.
Issue of stigma is, to some extent, is based on ignorance of how people who use drugs feel about how or the terms that are used for them. So it is also good to hear, because at some point it looks like policies are being made and handed down the throats of people who use drugs and so on. But this kind of network, collaboration, conference like this helps to bring even people who use drugs, their feelings, their perspectives, to play, so that you have a good understanding of what they feel about certain terms and bring them on board in formulating policies, and also changing the terms that are used. Because for persons who don't use drugs, they may not know how it feels when certain terms are being used for people who use drugs. So they need to be heard, they need to be listened to, and work together to address drug use issues and reduce stigma.
But I'm a psychologist by training, by profession. And when I got a job working in addiction, my other colleagues said, "Why do you want to work with junkies?" That was their perception. That's terrible. And the problem is that because people take drugs or drink, people don't expect or don't understand they have problems, they have other issues, and there are reasons why they drink or take drugs. And it shouldn't be about stigma. It's not the fact that they're only a dirty drunk or a junkie. They are people, and there are people with a problem. And that's what we need to understand.
Elaborate a bit on that, because it is arranged here in Lisbon specifically because this is where the EMCDDA is, the European Monitoring Centre on Drugs and Alcohol. And for us, really critically, is that tobacco or nicotine isn't in their mandate. Has always been an oddity. It's been curious, and it's curious even to them. Really, I've had a short chat with the director, Goose Deal, about the fact that they don't have a mandate for nicotine because nicotine tobacco use has been so ubiquitous in Europe and in the world that it's not even been on the radar, even though it kills more alcoholics, more drug users, drug misusers than does all of the major diseases, infectious diseases together. Globally.
It's the main cause of death.
Yep. And but this year it was different. It looked different. So we decided that we should be here and show our presence and show that there is a consumer voice, a global consumer voice that wants to be part of the solution and wants to inform policy in creating a better future with less tobacco-related harm, disease, and death.
Yeah, a lot of people are quite shocked when we have conversations to learn that there is a community of people who support safer nicotine users. Sometimes I've seen that look cross the face where they're skeptical and think that we're coming from industry, which we're not. We've learned some things. So I learned, for example, that there is absolutely no research at all on the smoking cessation efficacy of heated tobacco products. Whereas we already know that there is a tremendous amount of research, more than 78 studies on the smoking cessation efficacy of e-cigarettes. I've also learned that there are numerous studies on snus, so these are safer nicotine alternatives. The few presentations that have actually covered cigarettes, there are a couple of things that have shocked me. One is the extraordinarily high smoking rates in Germany.
Yeah.
The absolute lack of smoking-related policies that the World Health Organization promotes in Germany, the very strong interference from the traditional legacy tobacco industry in German tobacco policies. And so their smoking rates are, I believe it was 35 or 36%.
36.9.
Of Germans adults are smoking. Their smoking rates are extraordinarily high among youth. And they just increased taxes on e-cigarettes to make them more expensive than cigarettes. So that's I often use the word bonkers these days, but that's bonkers because these are product substitutes. So when it would be like increasing taxes on solar panels to
outcompete oil.
Improve climate change outcomes, which would obviously nobody would think that would make sense. So we have a long way to go. Different countries, though, are seeing dramatic declines in smoking. And there was a presentation on the situation in Norway from Carl Lund, and smoking rates have just plummeted there. And it's basically, he's already thinking about what does the world look like when there are no more smokers?
Right. The post-cigarette nicotine market. And that is interesting, and it leaves a lot of room for improvement, a lot of room for new product development, but not if we don't have a relevant discussion about it. Then it's not going to be functional. So I think the fact that Carl Lund was here holding a presentation and that we are here indicates, and we've been well received as well, indicates that there is a willingness to talk about it, there is a willingness to discuss, and also there's a willingness to recognize unintended negative consequences of not having transparent discussions.
We've also seen a number of presentations about substance use disorders among people who have mental health disorders or problems. And we were able to point out, I think critically, that people with mental health problems smoke at extraordinarily high rates, and that's their main cause of death. So if for adults with ADHD, the smoking rate is 40% in the United States, where the general population is now down to 11%. And bipolar disorder, it's 60% in the United States. And again, the neurotypical population is 11. And so, so that's a substance use problem that in general, when this community of scientists is thinking about opioid use and cannabis use and cocaine use. And so it's important to add that there are other substance use issues, and using these toxic forms of tobacco, and we're also able to point out that the prevalent theory there is that people with many mental health problems are self-medicating because nicotine actually helps them.
Right, absolutely. And even though tobacco traditionally has not been under the purview of the EMCDDA, it's quite clear that it is ingrained in all of the other problems that the EMCDDA is trying to address with different policies, with toolkits, with policy recommendations and white papers, doing a good job of it. So it would be suboptimal of us to carry on doing policies without actually also addressing the issue that kills more of the users than does the substances themselves.
Yeah. And finally, we didn't just come here to learn and listen and chat and to meet new people. We also presented data and had a poster presentation in the conference. And this is going to be very important. We're going to want to try to get this published. We conducted a survey of safer nicotine advocates, and the question, well, there were a series of questions, but the main push of the questions was for us to learn about their feelings of intimidation and harassment from people in the traditional tobacco control space, and the findings are really quite shocking. So some of us have actually received death threats. Many of us have been attacked legally. Most of us have been attacked verbally with ad hominem and slander, and so this is something we all know happens, but we've never really tried to put it together and get feedback on just the magnitude of the problem. And it is something we're aware of, that is, after you become an advocate in this space and work for years and years, it does cause people to get burned out, and just being criticized all the time, being accused of working for the tobacco industry all the time, it's a little bit beyond frustrating. And so I often joke that when in my previous work, when I supported organizations that promoted condoms to prevent sexually transmitted diseases, no one ever accused me of working for Big Condom. But here, in this field, I'm accused of working for big tobacco companies constantly, and that's pretty frustrating for us.
An anecdote on that is I've been doing this since 2007, 2008, when I realized the magnitude of the misinformation that has been put out regarding the Swedish smokeless products. That meetings regarding policy in Sweden that are open meetings held at the Swedish Association of Medical Doctors, open to the public, open to decision makers, open to politicians, routinely disinvite me less than 24 hours before any of their meetings that I, of course, routinely sign up for to join, and basically bar me at the door for being an advocate in this space. And that is not conducive to transparent discussions and problem solving.
It's incredibly important that the people who are going to be affected by the policies that are being set now have a seat at the table and a voice in helping to reach better policies. Policy making is never completely evidence-based, but it should be evidence-informed, and it should be informed by the voices of the people who will be affected, which is us as ex-smokers. And it's also smokers and people who are using other toxic forms of tobacco. Tobacco control is a very strange field because it explicitly denies these communities a voice in that decision making. And that decision making, it happens at multiple levels. So in the setting of research priorities, for example, as well as in the creation of prohibitions and the setting of taxes on different kinds of nicotine products. And so we really need to focus on those issues. And what's interesting to us is that the field of drug harm reduction has been dealing with all of the same issues, but for a lot longer than our community has. So we can learn from them, and we need to learn from them. Because they've had some success, not as much as they should, but there's a movement to legalize certain what have previously been illicit substances like cannabis and even cocaine in some parts of South America, and a change in mindset happening, while at the same time we are increasing prohibitions on nicotine, we're increasing taxes on nicotine, which is not intoxicating. It's a mild stimulant, and it doesn't make sense on the face of it. So we hope to continue to be a voice for reason in this, and so that's why it was critically important for us to find out how much people in our community actually are feeling intimidated and being harassed.
We are not engaging or having views on drug policy in that sense. The reason why we are here and why it's important that we cooperate and talk with drug harm reduction people and groups is that their successes are based in adopting a human rights to best attainable health-based approach to all of their work, to their communications. And that is also what has resonated with the regulators, with lawmakers, with national governments all around the world, where we have exactly the same issue, exactly the same problem, and pretty much exactly the same solution to the problem. Because if you look at it through that lens, what needs to be done and how to arrange a society where there are people who engage in not perfectly healthy behavior all the time are also acknowledged as having a full set of human rights to exercise.
Yeah, we don't lobby, and we don't weigh in on specific legislation or politicians, but what we can do is advocate for and educate. And so we would advocate for informed ex-smokers having a voice and a seat at the table in policy-making decisions. But and we have some thoughts on what better policies might exist, but we don't weigh in on any specific legislation. We understand, in contrast, that what we would call harm reduction deniers don't have the same restrictions on what they do. And that's also a concern. Anyway, so we should probably wrap this up. And so it's been a great learning experience for us here in Lisbon, Portugal. And we think we've made some good contributions to the discussion and made some good new friends. We wish all of you could be here with us. But for those of you in the INNCO community, we're going to see you face to face, I hope next June in Warsaw for the Global Forum on Nicotine and for our General Assembly. And then especially, we want to see all of you, every advocate in this space, in Panama City in November of 2023 for the Conference of Parties of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, COP10. This is the 10th one. And for the People's Conference of Parties, or the People's COP, which is something we'll be holding in parallel with scientists, speakers, with advocate speakers. And the idea is to highlight for journalists and for the public the contrast between a meeting that is open, that invites everyone. In fact, we'll invite all of the delegates to COP10, and we'll invite the Director General of the World Health Organization. They won't come, but our meeting is open, theirs is closed, secretive. Ours is open and transparent.
Ours are always open.
Yeah. So we hope to see you in Panama City, because that's going to be a lot of fun.
This bridge is made of hope. In this world of hunger, war, and strife, we can together, all included, build a better life. This bridge is made of hope.